My name is Diego Lima, and I am 36 years old, sitting here in a high-rise office overlooking Seattle's gray sky. I often wonder if my life is a long dream filled with deep wounds. I am a self-made entrepreneur who built a massive technology logistics company from nothing, without a single cent of external capital. My company is now worth hundreds of millions of dollars, with thousands of employees working tirelessly to operate an intelligent transportation system connecting warehouses worldwide. But behind the facade of success lies a story of emotional wounds that I still haven't been able to heal. And it all began with my family, those I once thought were my strongest support. Let me start from the beginning. From my childhood days in an ordinary middle-class neighborhood on the outskirts of São Paulo, Brazil. We weren't rich, but we weren't so poor that we had to worry about our next meal. My father, Rafael Lima, then in his early 40s, was a man full of ambition. He dreamed of making it big through business, opening a small electronics shop. He would repeatedly tell stories about the business tycoons he admired, as if sheer effort could propel him to the top. But reality was different. My father failed time and again. His first shop went bankrupt because he invested in the wrong place, buying low-quality inventory. Then he tried real estate, but the market crashed and we nearly lost our home. Each time my father would drown himself in alcohol, sitting at the dinner table muttering, "This time will be different, kids. I'll make it big." My mother, Camilla, now 60 years old, was a gentle and resourceful woman. Back then, she was the family's backbone. She worked at a small clothing store, earning enough to keep us afloat when my father's ventures failed. She always protected him no matter his mistakes. I remember late nights when my father came home drunk and she would gently guide him to bed, whispering, "Rafael, don't worry, everything will be okay." She was the one who kept our family from falling apart, but she also taught me that love can sometimes be blind. She shielded my father so much that she forgot her children also needed care. I was the only son, born into a family where everything seemed to revolve around my father's dreams. From a young age, I sensed a subtle disregard from my parents. They didn't beat or neglect me, but they never truly believed in me. In elementary school, I excitedly shared my idea of building a solar-powered toy truck for a science project. My father smirked, "Diego, don't indulge in pipe dreams. Life isn't a game." My mother said, "Focus on your studies. Don't make your father worry more." They didn't help me buy materials or encourage me to experiment. I had to figure it out myself using scrap from the garage, and in the end, my project won the school competition. But when I brought the trophy home, my father just glanced at it and turned away. "Just luck, son. Don't think you're something special." Moments like these piled up, like drops of water pooling into a puddle. I grew up feeling overlooked. My parents devoted all their time to my father's dreams. He was always talking about the next big opportunity, borrowing money from friends to invest in failed ventures. My mother was busy covering for him, comforting him, and sometimes even using the family's savings to pay off debts. My younger sister, Sophia, 3 years my junior, and I often had to fend for ourselves. Sophia was luckier because my mother favored her, teaching her to cook and sew. As for me, I was the son, so my father expected me to carry on his legacy, but he never taught me anything beyond lessons in failure. In high school, I started to rebel a little. I didn't fall into drugs or drop out, but I immersed myself in books and computers. I borrowed books from the library on programming, business, and logistics, a field that fascinated me because it involved connecting things efficiently. I dreamed of building a system to optimize freight transport, reducing costs and time. But whenever I shared this with my parents, they brushed it off. My father said, "You think you're smarter than me? I've tried business and it's not easy." My mother worried, "Diego, don't take risks. Get a stable job like working at a bank." They didn't support me in taking online courses or buying a used computer. I had to work at a cafe to pay for things myself. Then came university. I graduated with a degree in information technology, funded by a scholarship I earned myself. I decided not to return home, but to stay in Sao Paulo to start my own business. I was 22, starting from zero. I rented a tiny room, worked freelance programming to survive, and at night I developed my company idea. The company, Logitech Solutions, was a platform using AI to optimize supply chain logistics. Those first months were hell. I slept 3 hours a night, living on instant noodles and black coffee. No investors, no mentors, just me and an old laptop. I vividly remember the night the idea truly took shape. I sat in my moldy rented room, rain pattering outside the window. I thought of my father. He failed because he lacked systems, lacked technology. I'll do it differently, I told myself. I coded until morning, creating the first prototype. Then I pitched it to small companies, convincing them to try it for free. Gradually, the first client came, then the second, the third. The company started to grow. By age 28, I had my own office, a team of 20, and millions in revenue. But my success didn't bring the family joy I had hoped for. When I called home to share news of my first big contract, my father just grunted, "Just luck, Diego. Don't get cocky." My mother asked, "Are you sending money home? Your father's ill." They began to see my success as an obligation. I started supporting them, sending money monthly, covering medical bills for my father's high blood pressure. I even bought them a new house in a better neighborhood, hoping it would make them proud. But it didn't. Each time I visited, I saw their attitudes shift. My father looked at me with blatant envy, as if my success reminded him of his failures. "You got this far because of my genes," he'd say, his tone bitter. My mother was subtler, but I sensed her greed. She often asked about my assets, my company shares, as if calculating. "Diego, you should think of your family more. We're getting old. Who'll take care of us if not you?" I tried to ignore it, thinking it was just a generational gap. But deep down, I knew something was wrong. Every visit home felt tense, like stepping into a silent battlefield. They never asked about my personal life, about my wife, Elena, whom I met in university and married at 30. Elena was my rock, a talented designer who always encouraged me. But my parents saw her as an outsider. When Elena died suddenly in a car accident 2 years ago, they didn't even attend the funeral on time. My father said, "Diego, you have to be strong. Don't let personal matters affect your work." My mother texted, "I'm so sorry, but don't forget to send this month's money." That isolation hurt deeply. I had built an empire from nothing, but my family, those who should have been my motivation, became an emotional burden. They were jealous because I succeeded without them, and greedy because they wanted a piece of it. I started visiting less, focusing on the company. But then one day, everything changed. I received a message from my lawyer, and my world began to collapse. That morning, Seattle was draped in a light drizzle, as if the entire city shared my heavy mood. I sat in my office on the 32nd floor, gazing through the glass at the misty skyscrapers. My phone buzzed on the desk, the screen flashing the name Carlos Mendez, my personal lawyer who had been with me since the days when Logitech Solutions was just a vague idea in a garage. Carlos wasn't the type to make a fuss, so when his message popped up with the words, "Diego, call me back now. Urgent," my heart skipped a beat. A chill ran down my spine, though I didn't know why. I dialed his number, and his voice on the other end was low and urgent. "Diego, where are you?" he asked, skipping his usual pleasantries. "In the office." "What's going on, Carlos?" "I just got word from a reliable source. Your parents. They're preparing to file a petition with the court. They want to have you declared incompetent to manage your affairs, to take control of the company and your assets." I thought I misheard. I let out a laugh, but it was forced, hollow. "What? Carlos, are you joking? My parents? They can't do that. They don't even understand how my company works." "I'm not joking, Diego." Carlos's voice was firm. "I have documents. They've hired a sharp lawyer and they're building a case. They're claiming you're mentally overwhelmed, depressed, unstable. They're even citing Elena's death as a shock that's left you unfit to run Logitech." I felt a rush of heat to my head, followed by an icy chill. Elena, my wife, the woman I loved more than life itself, who passed away 2 years ago in a horrific car accident. I still remember that day. The wail of ambulance sirens, the acrid smell of smoke, the helplessness when the doctor told me she didn't make it. I struggled with the pain, sleepless nights, moments sitting alone in our empty apartment staring at her wedding ring. But I didn't break. I channeled my grief into drive, working twice as hard to make Logitech thrive. And now my parents, who didn't even show up to her funeral on time, who offered me no comfort, were using Elena's death to attack me. "Carlos," I said, my voice trembling, "what evidence do they have to claim I'm incompetent? I run this company better than anyone. We just signed deals with 3 major European corporations last month." "I know, Diego, but they're playing dirty. They have documents, emails, texts, even meeting minutes they claim as proof of your erratic behavior. They've also roped in a few shareholders, promising them bigger profits if they side with them. I'm digging into it, but you need to brace yourself. This isn't a small matter." I hung up, my hand still gripping the phone as if it were the only thing keeping me from falling into an abyss. I looked out the window. The rain kept falling, each drop sliding down the glass like tears I couldn't shed. My parents, the people who gave birth to me, raised me, but never truly understood me. They wanted to steal my company, the thing I built with sweat, tears, and blood. I felt stabbed in the back, not with a knife, but with something colder. Betrayal from my own family. I stood up and walked through the office hallway where my team was working vibrantly. They laughed, typed, debated new algorithms. Logitech wasn't just a company, it was my real family where I belonged. The thought that my parents wanted to destroy it all made me feel suffocated. I stepped into the meeting room, closed the door, and sat down, trying to gather my thoughts. Why were they doing this? Money, power, or simply because they couldn't stand that I succeeded without them? I thought back to the years I supported them, the $2 million house in São Paulo, medical bills for my father's hypertension, monthly allowances that let them live like royalty. I did it all because I thought it was my duty as a son. But now I realized they were never grateful. They saw it as their right, something I owed them. And when they wanted more, they were ready to stab me. I opened my laptop, checking emails. Nothing seemed out of place, but suspicion crept in. Had they stolen information from me? I recalled times when my mother called, asking odd questions about the company. "Diego, do you still hold all the shares? Is anyone in the company plotting against you?" At the time, I thought she was just concerned. Now I understood. She was probing, looking for cracks. My father was worse. He once visited the São Paulo office, demanding to meet shareholders, saying, "I'm Diego's father. I have a right to know how the company runs." I politely refused, but the look in his eyes as he left, cold, resentful, now haunted me. I called Carlos back. "Are you sure about the source? How far have they gone?" "Certain," Carlos replied. "My source is an assistant in the law firm they hired. They've been preparing the petition since last month, Diego. They have a whole plan. They claim you're obsessed with work to the point of losing control, that you're irritable in meetings, and they have witnesses. Some shareholders and even former employees." "Former employees?" I nearly shouted. "Who? I treat my employees like family." "I don't have details yet, but I'll find out. You need to meet me now. We have to plan a counter-strategy before they file officially." I agreed to meet Carlos that evening at a small cafe in downtown Seattle. When I arrived, he was already there, an espresso and a thick stack of documents in front of him. Carlos, a man in his 40s with salt and pepper hair, always stayed calm amid chaos. But this time I saw worry in his eyes. He slid the documents across the table, saying, "This is what I have." Not much, but enough to show they're serious. I flipped through the pages. There were copies of emails I'd sent to my management team, edited to make me sound aggressive. There was a meeting minute I didn't recall, claiming I lost control, slammed the table, and stormed out. All fabricated but done with chilling precision. I recognized the signature of a familiar shareholder, João Costa, who once complained I was too conservative in expansion strategies. João wasn't a close friend, but I never expected him to betray me. "What else?" I asked, my voice dry. "They mention Elena a lot," Carlos said, his eyes softening. "They say her death left you unstable, that you work 18-hour days to escape the pain. They even have a psychological report from who knows where, claiming you show signs of severe depression." I clenched my fists, nails digging into my palms. A psychological report? I've never seen a psychiatrist except for a few counseling sessions after Elena's death, and I got through it. Where did they get this report? Not clear yet. They might have bribed someone. But Diego, you need to understand, they're building a compelling case. If the court believes them, you could lose control of Logitech. They'd appoint a temporary manager, and your parents would find a way to insert themselves. I stayed silent, trying to suppress my anger. Inside, I was erupting. I imagined my parents in court playing the victims, saying they were worried about their son. I could see my mother with fake teary eyes, my father with a trembling voice recounting Diego's outbursts. They'd perform well, I knew. They were always good at acting. I left the cafe and drove back to my apartment. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in the living room staring at a photo from my wedding with Elena. She was smiling, her hair flowing in the wind, her white dress radiant. "I told you, Diego," I imagined her saying. "Family isn't blood, it's the people who truly understand and love you." Elena always suspected my parents. She once said, "They don't love you, Diego. They love what you provide." I brushed it off, thinking she was too sensitive. Now I wished I'd listened. The next morning, I went to the office early. I called my closest management team, Ana, the operations director, and Miguel, the tech director. I told them everything, holding nothing back. Ana, a strong but emotional woman, hugged me tightly. "Diego, we won't let them take the company. Logitech is yours, ours." Miguel was more practical. "We need to check the email system, internal data. If they stole information, we'll find out." I felt a spark of hope. I wasn't alone. But fear still clung to me. My parents didn't just want money, they wanted to destroy me, to tear down the legacy I'd built. I thought of Elena, of the nights I worked to exhaustion to make Logitech real. I couldn't let them win. I called Carlos again, asking him to dig deeper. "Find everything you can. I want to know what they've done, who they've talked to, and how many allies they have." Carlos agreed, but warned, "Diego, be careful. Don't confront your parents directly yet. They're waiting for you to lose your cool, to give them more evidence." I nodded, but inside I knew I couldn't just stand still. I needed to act, to protect what was mine. But first I had to face them, not in court, but in the house I bought for them. The upcoming Sunday dinner would be my chance to look them in the eyes, to see how far their deceit went. I felt nervous, but not out of fear. It was the thrill of someone who knew they were about to enter a battle, and I wasn't planning to lose. I began preparing. I reviewed emails, texts, every interaction with my parents over the past 2 years. I noticed times when my mother called late at night asking about the company in a sweet but calculated tone. There was a time my father came to the office demanding to see financial reports, saying, "I just want to help you." I'd been too naive, thinking they were just curious. Now I understood they'd been planning for a long time. I also started doubting myself. Had I been too cold to them? Had I neglected my family for work? Elena used to say I worked too hard, that I needed to rest. But I couldn't stop. Logitech was my dream. My way of proving I wasn't the overlooked boy from years ago. But what if my parents were right? What if I was unstable? The thought made me shudder, but I quickly dismissed it. No, I wasn't crazy. I was more clear-headed than ever, and I would prove it. But to prove it, I needed to understand exactly what my parents were doing behind my back. Carlos had warned me that they weren't acting alone. They had allies, a meticulously planned scheme, and a cunning lawyer leading the charge. I sat in my dimly lit apartment, the glow of streetlights filtering through the window casting shadows on Elena's wedding ring, which I still clutched tightly. I knew I had to dig deeper to uncover just how far they'd gone to destroy me. My parents, Rafael and Camila, weren't impulsive. They were calculating, patient, and more ruthless than I'd ever imagined. And I was about to find out just how ruthless. I started by contacting a private investigator, Ricardo, recommended by Carlos. Ricardo was a short, stocky man in his 50s with razor-sharp eyes and a confident smirk. He'd worked on numerous corporate disputes, and I knew I needed someone like him. We met in a secluded corner of a bar in downtown Seattle, where soft jazz music drowned out our conversation. I slid a beer toward him and got straight to the point. "Ricardo, I need to know everything about my parents. Who they're meeting, what they're saying, what they're doing. I need evidence." Ricardo took a sip of his beer and nodded. "Got it, Diego. But I need a clear picture. Who are your parents? What are they capable of? And what do you think they're specifically after?" I told him about Rafael and Camila. My father, a man who'd failed in business but always saw himself as a genius thwarted by circumstance. He had a knack for talking people into investing in his terrible ideas. My mother was different. She was the one behind the scenes, quietly orchestrating, covering his mistakes, and always knowing how to manipulate emotions. "They're not stupid," I said. "They know how to make people trust them. And I think they want my entire company, not just the money, but control." Ricardo took notes, his eyes never leaving me. "All right, I'll start tracking them. Do you know where they are?" "They're still in the house I bought them in Sao Paulo," I replied. "But my father frequently flies to the US, claiming it's to meet friends. I suspect he's meeting Logitech shareholders." Ricardo nodded. "I'll check their travel history, bank accounts, and emails if I can. But Diego, brace yourself. If they're really doing this, they won't stop easily." I nodded, feeling like a weight was crushing my chest. I didn't want to believe my parents could go this far, but I had no choice. I needed the truth. While Ricardo got to work, I received news from Miguel, Logitech's tech director. He called me late at night, his voice brimming with excitement. "Diego, I found something. Someone accessed your email from an IP address in Sao Paulo 3 months ago. It wasn't you. You were in London signing contracts at the time." My heart pounded. "Who? What did they get?" "Not sure who yet, but I found traces of them downloading internal emails, ones you sent to management about expansion strategies. There's even an email where you rejected João Costa's proposal to increase dividends. They could have used it to build their narrative that you're conservative and unstable." I hung up, blood rushing to my head. João Costa, Logitech's third largest shareholder, always complaining I didn't distribute profits fast enough. I'd thought he was just greedy, but now I realized he might be part of this plot. My parents had roped him in, likely promising bigger profits if they took control. I pictured my father with his smug smile sitting across from João in a fancy restaurant, pouring wine and saying, "Diego can't handle it. We'll do better." I called Ricardo back, asking him to focus on João. "Find out how many times he's met my father and where. I want every detail." Ricardo agreed, and I felt like I was starting to get a grip on the situation. But there was still a major piece of the puzzle: my parents' lawyer. Carlos had mentioned a cunning lawyer they'd hired, someone who'd won multiple family disputes. I needed to know who it was. I asked Carlos to dig deeper into legal records. A few days later, he sent me an email with details. My parents' lawyer was Mariana, a woman notorious in Sao Paulo for turning absurd lawsuits into victories. Mariana had once helped a family seize control of an entrepreneur's assets by proving he was incompetent due to alcoholism. She wasn't above using dirty tactics, from hiring fake witnesses to leveraging dubious psychological reports. Reading her file, a mix of fear and anger surged within me. My parents hadn't just betrayed me, they'd hired a shark to tear me apart. Carlos added, "Mariana doesn't work alone. She has a team that specializes in gathering evidence. They might have been tailing you, Diego. They could have photos of you working late or recordings of heated meeting arguments. They'll twist everything to fit their story. I started to feel hunted. I thought back to the past few months, the nights I stayed at the office until 2 a.m., the times I argued with my team about strategy. Had someone been watching me? Had my parents hired people to photograph me in my weakest moments? I recalled an incident a few months ago when I saw a man near the office holding a camera. I'd assumed he was just a reporter chasing a story. Now I wasn't so sure. I asked Ricardo to investigate Mariana Torres as well. Find out who she's working with and what they've collected on me. Ricardo nodded but warned, "Diego, if they've gone this far, you need to be careful even with those around you. They might have bribed your employees." His warning sent a chill through me. I trusted my team, Ana, Miguel, and others who'd been with me from the start. But I also knew money could change people. I began reviewing employee records, especially those who'd recently left. One name stood out: Lucas, a mid-level manager in the finance department. Lucas quit 3 months ago, claiming he wanted to pursue new opportunities. But now I remembered, he'd been close to João Costa, and once I caught him leaving João's office with a furtive look. I called Ana, asking her to review the financial records Lucas had managed. "See if anything's off," I said. "I suspect he leaked information to my parents." Ana agreed, and I felt like I was stepping into a maze. Each move could lead to a trap. Meanwhile, Ricardo sent his first report. He'd been tailing my parents for 3 days, and what he found chilled me to the bone. My father had met João Costa twice at a hotel in São Paulo. One meeting lasted until late, and Ricardo captured photos of my father handing João a stack of documents. My mother had met Mariana Torres at her law office carrying a USB drive. Ricardo couldn't overhear their conversation, but he saw my mother leave with a satisfied smile. The same smile I'd seen when she convinced someone to do her bidding. Ricardo also discovered that my parents had transferred money from the family account, the one I'd set up to support them, to an offshore account. The amount wasn't huge, about $50,000, but it was enough to raise suspicion. What were they using it for? Hiring Mariana? Bribing shareholders? Or paying someone to tail me? I began to feel like I was playing chess against my own parents. They'd been preparing for a long time, every move calculated. They didn't just want money, they wanted power to prove they could control me like they did when I was a child. But I wasn't that scared little boy anymore. I'd built Logitech from nothing, and I wouldn't let them take it. I asked Ricardo to keep tracking, focusing on the offshore account and my parents' meetings. Meanwhile, Ana reported finding irregular transactions in the financial records Lucas had handled. A small sum, about $10,000, had been transferred to an untraceable account just before Lucas left. "I'm tracing it," Ana said, "but I think Lucas may have sold internal information." My heart pounded harder. The pieces were falling into place, but the picture was still incomplete. My parents had recruited João Costa, hired Mariana Torres, and possibly bribed Lucas. They'd gathered evidence, doctored emails, forged meeting minutes, even a fake psychological report. They'd turned me into a puppet in their narrative, a troubled son who needed saving. But I wasn't their puppet. I was Diego Lima, who'd overcome every obstacle to build an empire, and I wouldn't let them win. I started planning for Sunday dinner, where I'd face them, look into their eyes, and uncover the truth. I knew they'd play their parts, feigning concern. But deep down, I was ready for this fight. Sunday arrived faster than I expected. I drove to the house in São Paulo, the one I'd bought for my parents 5 years ago, a modern villa with a sprawling garden, a shimmering pool, and sleek glass doors. From the outside, it was a symbol of success, but every time I stepped inside, it felt like entering a theater where everything was staged. I wore a simple white dress shirt and slacks, trying to maintain a calm exterior. But inside, I was a volcano ready to erupt. Elena's wedding ring sat in my pocket, a talisman reminding me why I was fighting. I knocked, and my mother, Camilla, opened the door. She wore a pale green dress, her hair neatly pinned up, her smile radiant, as if this were just an ordinary family evening. Diego, my dear, I've been waiting for you all day. She hugged me, but the embrace felt cold, rehearsed. I smiled back, my eyes locked on hers, searching for any hint of deceit. Hi, Mom, I said evenly. Where's Dad? In the kitchen making your favorite beef stew. She pulled me inside, her voice syrupy. You've lost weight, Diego. Work keeping you busy? Are you resting enough? Her question caught me off guard. It sounded innocent, but after what Carlos and Ricardo had told me, I recognized it as a trap. They wanted me to admit I was tired, that work was overwhelming me. I gave a faint smile. I'm fine, Mom. The company's doing great. Nothing to worry about. She nodded, but I caught her eyes flick over me as if assessing. I walked into the dining room where my father, Rafael, stood by the table, slicing beef with focused precision. He looked up, flashing the smile I knew well, the smile of a salesman always ready to persuade. Diego, my boy, it's been too long. Sit, let's have dinner. I sat, feeling like I was stepping onto a stage. The table was impeccably set. Crisp white tablecloth, flickering candles, the rich aroma of stew. But the atmosphere was heavy, like an invisible cloud hanging over us. I watched my parents, studying every gesture, every glance. They were good actors, I had to admit. Mom asked about my new Seattle office. Dad shared stories about a recent fishing trip with friends. But I wasn't fooled. I knew they were waiting for an opening for me to reveal a crack. Are you doing okay, Diego? Mom asked, her voice dripping with concern. She placed her hand on mine, her eyes soft. I worry about you. After what happened with Elena, I'm afraid you're working too hard, not giving yourself a break. There it was, the trap again. I felt heat rush to my head, but I held it together, smiling. Mom, I'm fine. Elena, she'd want me to keep going. The company was our dream. Dad took a sip of wine, a flash of irritation in his eyes that he quickly masked. You're right, Diego, but work isn't everything. You need family. We're family, aren't we? Your parents are always here for you. I wanted to laugh, but I just nodded. Of course, Dad. I thought of the doctored emails, the secret meetings with João Costa, the $50,000 wired to an offshore account. Family? They weren't family, they were enemies. Dinner continued, and I began to notice more subtle traps. Mom asked, Do you ever snap at your employees? I hear managing a big company is so stressful. Dad chimed in, Diego, are you sure you can handle that pressure? You look tired. They were trying to get me to admit I was losing control. I answered carefully, keeping my tone steady, but inside I felt like I was being stabbed with every word. Then came a moment that chilled me. Mom got up to fetch more wine, and I caught Dad glancing at her, a look heavy with meaning. It wasn't the look of a husband to his wife. It was the look of two conspirators checking if their plan was on track. I pretended not to notice, focusing on cutting my meat, but my heart pounded. They had a script, and I was sitting at the center of it. I decided to test them. Mom, Dad, I said casually, I'm thinking about selling some Logitech shares to ease the pressure. A few shareholders offered to buy, but I'm not sure. What do you think? Mom paused mid-pour, her hand freezing for a split second before continuing. Dad coughed lightly as if covering surprise. Sell shares? He asked, his voice slightly higher than usual. Who offered? João Costa? I nearly smiled. Dad had slipped. I hadn't mentioned João, yet he'd named him. No, not João, I lied, watching their reactions. Just some outside investors, but I think I can still handle running the company. Mom gave a strained smile, setting the wine bottle down. Of course, sweetheart. You've always been capable, but if you're tired, just tell me. Your father and I can help. Help? I raised an eyebrow, keeping my tone calm. What do you mean? Oh, I just mean, we're family, aren't we? If you need support, we're here. She glanced at Dad as if cueing him. Dad nodded, his voice lowering. Exactly, Diego, you've done well, but a company this big is tough to manage alone. Maybe you should let me look at the books or talk to the shareholders for you. My stomach churned. They didn't just want money, they wanted to worm their way into the company to take control. I smiled, but inside I was screaming. "Thanks, Mom, Dad," I said. "I'll think about it." Dinner ended awkwardly. I stood, saying I had to leave early for a meeting the next morning. Mom hugged me, whispering, "Take care of yourself, Diego. I don't want you burning out." Dad clapped my shoulder, saying, "Son, I'm proud of you, but don't let work consume you, okay?" I left the house, stepping into the starry night sky, but I felt no relief. I felt like I'd just walked out of a battle, and this was only the first round. In the car, I checked my phone and saw a message from Ricardo. "Diego, more info. Your parents met Mariana Torres again. They gave her a new stack of documents. Call me when you're free." I gripped the steering wheel, anger and pain intertwining. They'd performed all evening, feigning concern, while behind my back they were preparing to take me down. I thought of Elena, of the times she warned me about my parents. "They don't love you, Diego," she'd said. "They love what you provide." I hadn't believed her, but now I understood. They weren't family. They were strangers wearing the masks of parents to exploit me. I drove back to my apartment, my mind racing. I called Ricardo, who said my parents had given Mariana a USB with new emails, likely more doctored ones to smear me. He also said João Costa had contacted another shareholder, Marta Silva, promising a 20% dividend increase if she supported ousting me as CEO. Marta was a minor shareholder, but she had influence in investment circles. If my parents won her over, they'd gain another ally. I hung up, sat on the sofa, and opened my laptop. I reviewed office security footage, looking for any signs of intrusion. I didn't know how my parents got their information, but I suspected Lucas, the former employee, was involved. I texted Anna, asking her to dig deeper into Lucas, especially any transactions he handled before leaving. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in the dark, replaying dinner, my parents' cold gazes, their attempts to trap me. It felt like my heart was being torn apart. They weren't just betraying me, they were trying to destroy my legacy, what I'd built for Elena, for myself. I clutched the wedding ring, whispering, "I won't let them win, love." I knew I had to act fast. Dinner had confirmed my suspicions. My parents were plotting to bring me down, and they had no hesitation. I called Carlos, asking him to prepare legal documents to counter them. "We need to be ready for court," I said, "and I want them to pay." Carlos agreed, but warned, "Diego, stay calm. They'll use any moment you lose control against you. Don't let them win by breaking you." I nodded, though he couldn't see. I knew I had to stay strong, not just for myself, but for my team, for Logitech, for Elena. I stood and walked to the balcony, looking over the sleeping city. A fire ignited within me, not anger, but resolve. They wanted war? I'd show them who I was. The day of the trial arrived sooner than I expected. That morning, Seattle's sky was gray, with a light drizzle falling like a warning. I stood before the mirror in my apartment, tying my tie and adjusting the black suit Elena had once picked out for me. "You look strong," she'd said, her smile radiant. Now I looked into my own eyes in the reflection, not the boy my parents once dismissed, but a man ready to fight. Yet deep inside, a dull ache lingered. I was about to face my parents in court, the people who gave me life but now sought to destroy me. I arrived at the courthouse early with Carlos, my lawyer. The courtroom was cold, with stark white walls and polished wooden benches. I sat at the table on the right, silently watching as my parents entered. They looked like perfect victims. My father, Rafael, wore an old gray suit, his shoulders slightly hunched as if carrying the weight of the world. My mother, Camilla, was in a simple black dress, her eyes red, clutching a tissue. They didn't look at me, but I felt their gaze, not one of love, but of cold calculation. Mariana Torres, their lawyer, strode in with an air of confidence. Tall, her hair tightly pinned, her eyes sharp as knives. I'd read her file, a legal shark who won cases by twisting the truth. She smiled at me, but there was no warmth in it. I clenched my fists under the table, forcing myself to stay calm. The judge, a stern, middle-aged woman, banged her gavel to open the session. We are here today to consider the petition of Mr. Rafael Lima and Mrs. Camila Lima, alleging that Mr. Diego Lima is unfit to manage his assets and Logitech solutions due to mental instability. Counsel for the petitioners, please proceed. Mariana stood, her voice smooth as velvet but sharp as a blade. Your Honor, my clients, Mr. Rafael and Mrs. Camila, are the parents of Diego Lima. They bring this petition not for personal gain but out of love for their son. Diego, a talented entrepreneur, has been deeply affected by the death of his wife, Elena Lima, 2 years ago. He overworks, exhibits erratic behavior, and is no longer capable of running Logitech, a company worth hundreds of millions. We will present evidence, including emails, meeting minutes, and a psychological report to show that Diego needs protection, not only for his own sake but for the shareholders and employees of the company. My blood boiled. Protection? They were performing, playing the role of concerned parents while plotting to steal my company. I glanced at Carlos, who gave a subtle nod as if to say, "Stay calm, we're prepared." Mariana began presenting her evidence. She showed a series of doctored emails that painted me as aggressive, barking unreasonable orders at employees. One email read, "If you can't do it, I'll find someone else," a line taken out of context from an internal strategy debate. She also presented meeting minutes describing me slamming the table and storming out after an argument with João Costa. I knew it was fake. I'd never slammed a table, but the document was meticulously forged, bearing João's signature and that of a former employee, Lucas. Then Mariana called her first witness, João Costa. He took the stand, looking slightly nervous but trying to project confidence. "I'm a shareholder in Logitech," he said. "I've worked with Diego for years, but lately he's become overly cautious, rejecting growth proposals. He works 18-hour days, sometimes yelling in meetings. I'm concerned he's no longer fit to lead." I clenched my fists, my nails digging into my palms. João was lying through his teeth. I remembered those meetings. He wanted to increase dividends for quick cash, disregarding the company's long-term strategy. But I couldn't speak out. Not yet. Carlos placed a hand on my shoulder, whispering, "Let them talk. We'll hit back." Mariana continued, presenting a psychological report from an independent expert, claiming I showed signs of severe depression and work obsession. I nearly laughed at the absurdity. I'd never seen a psychiatrist beyond a few brief counseling sessions after Elena's death. The report was clearly fake, but it was presented with convincing seals and signatures. My parents sat silently, occasionally dabbing at tears. My mother bowed her head, as if overwhelmed by grief over my condition. My father held her hand, patting it gently. The picture of a devoted father. I wanted to scream, to stand and expose them, but I knew I had to wait. Carlos had said, "They'll shoot themselves in the foot. Let them perform." The first day of the trial ended with the advantage leaning toward them. Mariana had painted a perfect picture. I was a talented but obsessed entrepreneur, unraveling after my wife's death, in need of rescue. Shareholders like João backed her up, creating the impression that Logitech would collapse if I remained in charge. I left the courtroom feeling weighed down by a boulder, but I didn't break. I knew I had evidence and my counterattack was coming. The second day of the trial was even more intense. I woke up at 4 a.m., unable to sleep, my mind reeling from the previous day. The image of my parents sitting in court feigning anguish haunted me. I clutched Elena's wedding ring, squeezing it tightly as if she could lend me strength. "I'll do this, love," I whispered before leaving my apartment for the courthouse. Today, Mariana went for the jugular. She called my parents to the witness stand, and that's when the betrayal cut deepest. My mother went first, her eyes red, her voice trembling. "Diego is my son," she said, dabbing at tears with a tissue. "I love him, but after Elena passed, he changed. He works non-stop, sometimes calling me at midnight, rambling incoherently. Once he yelled at his father just for asking about the company. I'm scared he's going to break." It felt like a knife to my chest. Midnight calls? I'd only called her a few times to talk about Elena. and she always steered the conversation to money. Yelling at my father? That was when he showed up at my office demanding to see the books, and I politely refused. She was twisting everything, painting me as unhinged. My father was worse. He took the stand and spun a tale about a family dinner where I exploded emotionally, claiming I threw a plate to the floor because of work pressure. I sat there, blood boiling, but Carlos gripped my arm, whispering, "Don't react. They want you to lose it." Mariana grilled me when I took the stand. Her questions were sharp, slicing into every word I said. "Mr. Lima, do you often work late into the night? Did you struggle to cope with your wife's death? Have you ever lost control in a meeting?" I answered carefully, emphasizing that I ran Logitech effectively, that I'd turned my grief into growth for the company. But she dug into personal matters, mentioning Elena repeatedly, as if trying to break me in court. "Mr. Lima," Mariana said, her voice sweet but venomous, "are you sure you're stable? Your parents say you've cried alone in your office after your wife's death. Is that the behavior of someone fit to run a multi-hundred-million-dollar company?" My heart tightened. Yes, I'd cried. There were nights in my office staring at Elena's photo, tears falling uncontrollably. But that was human grief, not instability. I took a deep breath and replied, "I'm human, Miss Torres. I lost my wife and I grieved, but I never let it affect the company. Logitech grew 30% last year and I led that growth." Mariana smiled as if I'd walked into a trap. "Growth, yes, but shareholders like Mr. João Costa say you reject new strategies, that you're obsessed with control. Is that the behavior of a stable leader?" I wanted to scream that João only wanted quick cash, that he'd sold me out for my parents' empty promises. But I held back, saying, "I make decisions for the company's long-term benefit. That's my responsibility." The second day ended with me feeling suffocated. My parents, with Mariana's help, had painted a terrifying picture. I was an obsessed, exhausted, unreliable man. Some minor shareholders in the courtroom began whispering, eyeing me with suspicion. I started to wonder, was I too rigid? Had I neglected everything for Logitech? The thought shook me, but I quickly pushed it aside. No, I wasn't crazy. I was Diego Lima, and I would fight. I left the courthouse feeling like I'd run through a storm. Carlos walked beside me, saying, "They're trying to make you doubt yourself, Diego. Don't let them win. We have evidence, and tomorrow we'll turn the tables." I nodded, but inside a deep wound festered. My parents weren't just betraying me. They were trying to erase me, to make me a failure in the world's eyes. But I wouldn't let them succeed. I gripped Elena's ring, whispering, "I'll do this, love." That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in my home office, the laptop screen casting light on my face. Carlos had sent all the evidence we'd gathered, bank statements, emails, and recordings from Ricardo. Each piece was a bullet, and I knew tomorrow in court I'd fire back. I thought of my parents, their fake tears in the courtroom, how they'd painted me as unstable to serve their greed. But I wasn't the scared boy from years ago. I was Diego Lima, and I was ready to turn the tables. The next morning, I walked into the courtroom with cold confidence, dressed in my black suit, hair neatly combed, eyes sharp. My parents sat across the room, still playing the perfect victims. My mother dabbed at tears, my father bowed his head, but I wasn't fooled anymore. Mariana Torres, their lawyer, stood ready to attack. But today was our turn. Carlos rose, his voice steady and commanding. "Your Honor, the petitioners have spun an emotional tale about Mr. Diego Lima, portraying him as unstable and unfit to lead Logitech Solutions. But today we will show that this narrative is a fabrication, a conspiracy to seize Mr. Lima's assets and company, orchestrated by his own parents, Mr. Rafael and Mrs. Camila Lima, with the help of certain individuals." The courtroom fell silent. I saw my mother freeze, her grip tightening on her tissue. My father glanced at Mariana, eyes nervous. Carlos continued, presenting the first piece of evidence. Bank statements showing my parents had embezzled $1.2 million from the family account I'd set up to support them. This money, Carlos said, was transferred to an account in the Cayman Islands, and from there, portions were used to pay Ms. Mariana Torres, the petitioner's lawyer, and to bribe shareholder João Costa. Mariana shot up, objecting. Your Honor, these are baseless accusations. There's no evidence linking my clients to these transactions. Carlos smiled calmly, producing a stack of documents. We have bank statements with Mr. Rafael Lima's signature, along with transactions made from his personal computer. We also have emails between Mr. Rafael and Mr. João Costa, in which Rafael promised a 20% profit windfall if Costa supported removing Diego Lima as CEO. I watched João Costa seated in the back. He bowed his head, face pale. The judge requested the emails, and when they appeared on the courtroom's large screen, I saw my mother clutch my father's hand, her eyes panicked. The email was explicit. My father wrote, Diego can't go on. You'll get your share, João. Just stand with us. Carlos didn't stop. He played a recording Ricardo had obtained, a conversation between my father and João in a São Paulo restaurant. My father's voice came through cold and calculated. Diego's too obsessed. We push him out and I'll ensure profits soar. João replied, his tone greedy. If you're sure, Rafael. But we need solid evidence. Whispers erupted in the courtroom, and I saw some minor shareholders shake their heads, their eyes disappointed. Mariana tried to counter, claiming the recording could be fabricated, but Carlos was ready. He presented a report from an independent audio expert confirming its authenticity. Furthermore, Carlos said, we have evidence that Ms. Mariana Torres coached witnesses to lie. An assistant from her firm provided us with internal emails in which Ms. Torres instructed a former Logitech employee, Mr. Lucas Mendez, to supply false information about Diego Lima's behavior. A jolt ran through me. Lucas, the one I'd suspected all along. Carlos went on. Lucas had installed tracking software in Logitech's system, sending my internal emails to my parents. One of the doctored emails Mariana used to call me aggressive was actually a routine strategy discussion. When Carlos displayed the original email alongside the altered version on the screen, the courtroom was nearly breathless. I looked at my parents. My mother no longer wiped tears. She sat rigid, her eyes blank. My father bowed his head, hands gripping the chair. They knew they were losing. Mariana, though still trying to project confidence, faltered when the judge asked her to explain the emails coaching false testimony. We'll need time to review, she stammered. Carlos delivered the final blow. Your Honor, Mr. Diego Lima is not only a talented entrepreneur but someone who built Logitech solutions from nothing. He overcame personal tragedy to drive 30% growth in the past year. What the petitioners call instability is dedication. They don't want to protect him. They want to steal his company out of greed. As Carlos sat, a spark lit within me. The courtroom buzzed with whispers, and I saw Marta Silva, the shareholder João had tried to sway, nod at me from the back. I'd sent her evidence the day before, and now she was on my side. Mariana tried to rally, calling a supposed psychologist to bolster the fake report about my depression. But Carlos swiftly exposed that the doctor lacked a valid license, and his report was based solely on information from my parents, not any sessions with me. The judge shook her head, jotting notes, and I knew we were winning. The day ended with the advantage firmly on my side. I left the courtroom feeling like a weight had lifted, but the pain wasn't gone. My parents, whom I'd once tried to please, had tried to ruin me. I gripped Elena's ring, whispering, "We're almost there, love." On the final day of the trial, I entered the courtroom with an unusual calm. I knew I had everything needed to win: evidence, truth, and a team behind me. But I also knew that even if I won, the wound in my heart would never heal. My parents had betrayed me, and no ruling could erase that. The judge called for final arguments. Mariana, though cornered, still tried to salvage her case. She spoke of my parents' love and how they only wanted to protect me, but her voice lacked conviction, and her eyes avoided the judge's gaze. Carlos, in contrast, stood tall, his voice resounding as he summarized the evidence. from financial embezzlement to forged emails and recordings proving my parents' and João Costa's conspiracy. Your Honor, he concluded, Diego Lima is not only competent but has built one of the world's most successful tech companies. The petitioner's request is an insult to his achievements. The judge recessed to deliberate, and during the 2-hour wait, I sat in the hallway staring out a window. Carlos patted my shoulder. You did great, Diego. They don't stand a chance. I nodded but said nothing. I thought of Elena, of the days we dreamed of Logitech together. She'd be proud, but she'd also be heartbroken. Heartbroken that my family had become this. Finally, the judge returned. After reviewing all evidence, she said, her voice stern, this court finds Mr. Diego Lima fully competent to lead Logitech Solutions. The petition by Mr. Rafael and Mrs. Camila Lima is dismissed. Furthermore, the court will initiate an investigation into the petitioner's financial embezzlement and false testimony based on the evidence provided. The courtroom erupted in applause from the Logitech team. Ana and Miguel hugged me, beaming, but I didn't smile. I looked at my parents. My mother slumped, covering her face, while my father sat motionless, his eyes empty. They'd lost, and I knew they'd never admit their wrongs. I left the courtroom feeling like I'd walked through a storm. I'd kept my company, my honor restored, but my heart was heavy. My parents hadn't just lost the case. They'd lost me. Forever.